everybody. This is Elena Mosaner, and you are listening and watching Mind Over Matter podcast. And today I'm going to be speaking to Dr. Rachel Hott, who is a New York State licensed clinical psychologist. She is the NLP trainer, Ericksonian hypnotherapist, and also a co-director of the NLP Center of New York. Welcome, Dr. Hott.
Thank you, and thanks for inviting me to Mind Over Matter. I'm curious what you want to know.
Of course, yes. So I'm gonna let the audience know that you and I know each other for probably over 15 years. Yes, we met in 2004. So I was a student at the NLP Center. I took the practitioner, not the trainer, the practitioner, NLP practitioner, and also master practitioner. So that's how we met. That was a long time ago, and I still, you remember things that I've learned. I come back to these things. They have become, the base for my work. Really, it was incredible. So I wanted to talk about NLP. I wanted to talk about Ericksonian hypnosis. I wanted to talk about what's happening in New York, your clients, and anything else that.
Okay, what's happening right now is I have a dog who's barking, but I have somebody who will take care of her. What's happening now, meaning August 5th, 2021, in the year of still dealing with COVID.
What's going on? Let's check in. What is happening?
I'd say things are happening online. I think the whole world of doing remote work has, it was happening before 2020, right?
Yeah.
For sure, you could look at all the online training. But for us at the NLP Center of New York, I mean, when you and I knew each other in 2004, we were downtown in Manhattan, right? We would work and we would see not just this top half, right? And we would walk around and we'd be interacting. Now we're leading groups where we create the breakout rooms, right? And then I pop in and I observe and I give feedback and then I leave and I go somewhere else. And so, those are big changes. But, one of the things that we know about with NLP, if you look at it as a communications technology, with everything has changed. And here I am starting right away with we're doing remote learning, right? Or online learning, but we're still talking about communication, right? And, the level of people still dealing with, well, how do I feel? Or how am I going to handle now working at home? Or how do I handle working at home when there's a family member around or my dog is barking, right? All of that, that technology hasn't stopped that.
Yeah. So I can imagine the conversations are obviously different, right? But the communication part is still there, right? So do you feel like people are coming with different set of needs nowadays than it was 10 years ago?
It's additional, just what has come more into the conversation would be something around, is it safe, to travel, or how do I deal with a family member who has chosen to, be vaccinated, not be vaccinated, whatever the situation is, right? What do I do? My employer wants us to come in. I don't feel comfortable traveling. And, we're in Manhattan, so it might be the conversation about public transportation, right?
Yeah.
And then I can ask another client, how are you doing? And they're like, oh, everything's under control with COVID. I'm just dealing with a new job and handling, how people are not yet stepping up to their responsibilities, right? And then it goes back to, hey, it doesn't matter. Just like you and I are talking right now, a lot of people have been saying to me, can you do hypnosis with this, this way, this technology? And for sure, I would prefer to be in person on some ideal. However, let's start with the idea of mirroring, right? I can still connect with you, in this way of looking and sometimes looking at the camera, or sometimes looking at the screen. and maybe slowing down a little bit, right?
Mhm.
Not using my hands, So it's not that I can't mirror, it's just that I don't know how you're sitting, you
Mhm.
know?
Mm.
And so yeah, we might be limited with that, and the idea that maybe, at some point, right, I could
Yeah.
tune in and kind of connect. So we're not limited to mirror. Um, I have said to clients, when I'm doing hypnosis or any psychotherapy, I'd like to know where you're calling from. I'd like to know where you are.
That creates a connection in a sense, right? Even like a spatial connection to know where the person is calling from, right? For you and just
It's a
to
spatial
understand where
connection, but it's also, I had one time a class in person
they are.
where suddenly somebody had a moment where they were faint, right? And another student ran over to help them, and we were able. They were fine. They were just a little dehydrated, right? I haven't really had too many emergencies in my training practice or individual practice. So when I ask, where are you located? It's like, yeah, help me know space, but it's also if something occurs, because I think, maybe Elena, I'm also talking about is how we've changed our work online. And I want to be able to know where you are if something happened.
Yeah,
Right? That's different, in
that's
terms.
true. That's very true. Like certain guidelines must be changing, right? Just maybe people who need to report the address even,
Well, yeah, I mean,
Come to-
many people on a traditional like would have an intake form, right? But if
Yeah,
you're in my office, I don't need to know because I would just,
exactly.
call
Yeah.
911, right?
Rachel, very quickly, could you just lower down the camera a little bit so we can see you? Because there's a lot of space up.
Is
Yeah,
that
there you go.
better?
That,
Or is
that's
the screen better?
this is better, just like that. What you did
This
now.
is good?
Yeah,
Okay.
better.
All right. Thank you.
You're welcome. I'd like to. There are people who are watching and listening us, and maybe even hearing about NLP for the first time.
Mhm.
How would you define NLP to somebody who is hearing it for the first time, and maybe somebody who
Mm.
has some idea about it?
Yeah, yeah. So it's a tricky one, right? It's neuro-linguistic programming. So we say NLP because neuro-linguistic programming is a mouthful. And then, like one of the quick ways that I said it earlier was NLP is a communications technology. Communication is interpersonal communication as well as intra
Mhm.
communication. Sometimes we add in, NLP is the study of our subjective reality, our experience, and how do we experience, our neurology, how do we think,
Mhm.
right? Our linguistics, how do we speak, but how do we also receive language? And then our programming, which in the old days would have been like, what are our tapes? And now with hypnosis, I'd say, what trance do we live in, right?
Mhm.
And computer language, it could be like, how are we programmed? And looking at how to change it for the way that we want to change our programming. And, when NLP started in the mid 70s, neuroscience wasn't as well known
Mhm.
not as it is now. So we kind of can go back to say, wow, neurology, neuroplasticity, wow, we could actually change the programming, right? How do we think? How do thoughts actually affect the way that our body is, right? Or paying attention to our body, and like, how do we change our experience of how we are holding tension, right? All of these more scientific research based on that, so many times very simple ways to say, okay, NLP is a study of how do we change thoughts, feelings, and behaviors.
Mhm.
Okay. And of course, then you say, well, that sounds like psychology, really, right? Or any kind of psychotherapy. And I'd say there's influences from humanistic psychology, cognitive psychology, behavioral psychology, and then the greatest contribution is from Milton Erickson, Ericksonian hypnosis. And some people think Erickson, they go, oh, Erickson, who was a developmental psychologist and has incredible value. But here we're really talking about Milton Erickson. And that was a unique education for me because I came through in psychology, but when I studied NLP starting in like 1981, I had never heard of Milton Erickson before.
Yeah. Yeah, I remember Milton Erickson and the founders of NLP, Grinder and Bandler, right? I think.
Yeah, there's a lot of early developers, you know, there's a variety of people who kind of come into the circle of that, you know, and so they kind of have the starting point of developers, but then there's a great amount of founders, I'd say. And
Yeah.
I came in after that kind of got organized by creating what they created. The founders sort of brought in the developers, you know, sort of mixed that. They created a curriculum for practitioner training, which you took, and a master practitioner training, which you took. And that really, then there's so many contributors, you know, in many different styles, but we adhere to what's called the International Association of NLP.
Okay.
So that's kind of our body that creates guidelines. And then there's actually this larger body called the Leadership Summit, where many, many, many different institutes all over the world bring our NLP leaders to discuss and create lots of opinions about how NLP would be best taught, or, you know, where's the research for NLP, or, you know, just paying attention to any questions about NLP. So there are some aspects, but you know, again, I would say it's in a non-traditional world. You know, it's not in where I went for clinical psychology, you know, where I had to kind of jump the hoops, or like you did your master's degree, you know, like
it's you don't normally study NLP in universities.
You don't normally. However, if you'll start looking, or if people want to ask me, you know, and contact the NLP Center of New York, there are a couple of universities now. I think there's one in Nicaragua, you know, but it might be like an online training that you actually could. And in Europe, I think I have some Leadership Summit contacts who might say, oh, no, but I don't have them personally, you know, like where, or in the States, I'm not sure. But that may happen more and more.
It probably will. And I also, when I did go to universities, my professors, that while they didn't necessarily teach an NLP course, but they were trained in NLP. So students were finding out and looking for ways to study NLP.
Yeah. You know what happens a lot is that people will come who are like in psychology or social work or some area, and they just want more training and techniques, or somebody who's in coaching and, you know, kind of went to whatever it would be their traditional coaching and heard about NLP, right? Then you get people who want to transition out of their career. They're not finding purpose, and they've heard about NLP, and they come, and sometimes it's because a friend did NLP, or a family member did NLP, or a boss, and they go, wow, they were so good at their communicating, or they were so understanding, or their life seems like they're able to handle it. It's not about magic, you know, not about like, oh, I only feel joy. It's knowing how to be balanced with joy and whatever life throws us, you know, and the variety of stress, you know.
So people that study NLP are, like you said, either coaches, psychologists, people that psychotherapists that are working with others, and also who else comes to you? Business.
Oh, it's a great question. It actually, because if you go back to the big definition of communication technology, who can't study with us on some level, because we're all dealing with either communicating to ourselves or communicating with somebody else, even if it means just, you know, going on the street and saying hello to a shopkeeper, right? Like, we're always communicating, you can't not. So there are many people who say, you know, I'm not coming to be a coach. I just want to work on myself. And everybody, we say, and I hope you remember, you always had to work on your own stuff. You
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
choose what to work on because it's a educational kind of environment, right? I mean,
Yeah.
we do work privately, you can work in a one-on-one counseling session as well. But a lot of people say, I got to work on myself. We say, yes, everybody has to do personal development. Some of you want to do professional development.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah. It's truly incredible. The processes, so many unique processes you can learn in NLP, and like you said, study with others in groups or in pairs, and really work on your own set of issues or problems that you want to overcome. I found that for me, NLP really did help my communication, because where I come from in Russia, I think one element that was missing is it was problematic is communication. I'm not sure, maybe it has something to do where Russia was at the time, the Soviet Union, and maybe because there was no, I usually thought maybe because there was no market economy for a long time. When there is market economy, there is, the need for private sectors to communicate and sell, but it didn't exist in the Soviet Union. Everybody were the same. So
Well, there's a cultural, you could look at it as cultural, what influences and what was encouraged, right? Because there are cultures that don't encourage somebody to deal with a variety of feelings. It may encourage what you think, right? But not necessarily what you feel. And then, we would say, well, as you left that culture, you came into, here in more North American culture, New York, and it starts to encourage you and, your unique self, Elena. Like that's part of it. And that's one of the things we explore in NLP, to say, the map is not the territory. So ultimately learning about your territory, realizing you may have gotten some messages from some greater map, so to speak, thinking that was you, right? And then you learn about yourself, and the aspects of where NLP, I'd say, contributes differently than traditional psychotherapy or communication models would be in the observation of the student and the client, so let's say when you're talking about your memory and, watching where your eyes are going a little bit, just kind of like, what are you accessing? Knowing that you're going back to some visual remembered, right? And then listening to your language to see how are you utilizing your awareness. There's some visual, there's some auditory, there's some feeling words, and beginning to discover just really for yourself what is most important, right? Like really, what's your criteria?
Yeah.
And so a lot of it is being in conversation with you in content, but also paying attention to what we say is the form. And allowing you to also, hopefully feel understood, right? Which again could be a good traditional psychotherapy anyway,
Yeah. Some of those, the rapport techniques to help us mirror, understand what words people are using. I was actually thinking how maybe it's possible. I'm with my husband already for 6 years, and I was using one set of words, and now that we're influencing each other, he may be more into feeling. He's very feeling kind of person, and sometimes I just start using his words and talk like him, and I'm like, I wonder if it was just more like a copy of a word, but do I really become more into feeling? It's just so interesting how we truly influence each other the more time we spend together, right?
Yeah, you start to be a little bit more automatic, which you could say is unconscious, and that you're influencing each other in a positive way, right? We're talking about influencing with the intention of closeness and caring, and the appropriateness of that. it's something that you know, continue to ask yourself, well, what is it that you really want, you know, in a marital relationship, you know, in a business relationship, looking at the outcome. You know, I think when we go through all the different definitions, sometimes we'll talk about, you know, NLP being more of a short-term, future-oriented style.
Mm.
You know, that we're often will be okay to explore the past. You know, we talk about the past with this idea. There's a quote, and I don't know who originated it. You know, it's okay to look at the past, just don't stare at it, right?
Mhm.
So it's not that we don't look at the past, but we do a lot of what do you want? You know,
Forward
what,
movement, more and more
yeah,
focus on the forward. Yeah.
well, how do you want it to be? And then checking in with, well, what do you have within you, you know, which is the resource language from Erickson, you know, that you have all the resources within you. What is the resources? What are the resources that you need to get there? Then learning how to access, which may be to go back to your past, you
Mhm.
know, so a client who says, you know, I really want more confidence, and say, yeah, this is a good thing. It'll be great for your next job interview or the next time you're asking somebody out on a date. And where and when have you had that confidence? You know, that's the moment, you know, that they start to access, right?
Mhm.
And I guess, you know, another contribution that say NLP has a nice kind of like uniqueness to would be when you access a resource, a memory, how you go into it. That's utilizing the Ericksonian hypnosis, you know,
Yeah.
how you go in.
Because it could be unique, right, for everyone. How do you go into
Mhm.
that resource? Is this a picture? Is this a memory? Is this a feeling? And when we ask that question, if somebody's asking me, or if I ask that question, I would be curious myself. How do
Mhm.
you think people access? Is there a commonality in how people access
I
that?
think I really, you know, treat it as your territory, and it's more of a, I don't know how you go back in time, and I do know that you can find that memory, can't you? Right?
Mhm.
And, you know, so we, you know, you look at, let's say, guided meditation and going back into a resource state. And where's the similarity is accessing a memory. Sure, the guided meditation often is directing you, you
Mhm.
know, and yeah, a lot of people will say nature for sure, right? But then nature has like, what categories come to mind when you think of nature? There's so many. What would you say?
Um, to me, there's too many categories. I mean, I obviously the ocean and the forest.
Yeah, the ocean, the forest. Okay. So of course, right, like just like you said, whereas when in an NLP style, it would be we're talking about confidence and you know, I wonder where and when you've experienced confidence in the past. You have, haven't you? You know, yes. And let's go access that and be curious. I don't know where and when you find a memory, maybe it's at a time in the past recently or long ago,
Mm.
right?
It's
And it's
interactive.
very
It's interactive. You're actually talking to a client. It's not.
well, I'm talking in a way to the conscious and the unconscious at the same time, right? Somebody could be
With
in
their
a
eyes
very,
closed. They're
it could be
responding.
eyes
Yeah.
closed or eyes open. The trance can happen in so many different levels, you know.
This is
It was,
very important.
if
Yeah.
it's more formal, I would say, let's take a moment, focus inward, close your eyes. And then it's really that's the, you know, your question of like, well, how do they find it? Isn't it interesting? We don't know, but what do we do know? Subjective reality based on our sensory experience. So, what do we have? You know, visual, auditory, kinesthetic, smell,
Mm-hmm.
taste, right?
Yes. So ears,
So,
nose, eyes, taste, touch.
yeah, yeah.
I usually go.
So,
Yeah.
somehow we're going to remember, and you know, it's not about having your amazing ability to be fully like virtual reality. Like that would be cool,
Mhm.
right? Sometimes when I am somewhere really wonderful, I'll just look at it and close my eyes and do my best to kind of get the memory, just to hold it, to remind myself in the future, someday I'll need this. But we don't always remember to do that. And especially when we were younger, we didn't.
Yeah.
So, there's no easy answer about how do we access. You as the coach or the guide, you help the person to remember, but it's really that person who goes into their territory and
And
finds a
this,
way.
yeah. And one thing about Ericksonian hypnosis, which is something that I wanted to ask, it's it's non-directive style, right? So there's
Right.
a school of hypnosis where I went to that was so direct. Dave Ellman, Gil Boyne, I studied with Dr. George Bien before I came to you guys. And I remember my style was very directive, and then I started learning something different where you let the client go into experience and access the resources and you wait. So would you say there's two schools, and do you feel like there's more benefit in the
I'm
non-direct?
a I'm a I'm a very much of a diplomat, and I'll go with both, and the usefulness of the client having uh, times when somebody may say, you know, take a moment and walk down the stairs, like maybe somebody needs a little bit more direction. And then other times it'd be like, and when you're walking down the stairs, discover, whether you're going quickly or slowly, like there's some uniqueness of having both.
Right.
I'm more trained in the more indirect style. I'm just
I
more
like that
trained
and I
that way.
appreciate it,
Yeah.
Rachel, because and just like you said, the example, and you're taken down as you take down the stairs. And I often use the word I'm curious, which I learned from you. I'm curious whether they appear looking gray. Are
Mhm,
they, is
mhm,
it a spiral staircase? Or maybe it's a
mhm,
straight
mhm,
staircase. So
mhm,
allowing the client to
mhm,
create their own picture, right? And
mhm.
that's also
Yeah.
kind of gives them a sense of creativity and
Mhm,
autonomy in a sense,
mhm.
right? That
Yeah,
they're
the
creating.
creativity. The
Mhm.
creativity is really important. I probably would adjust the language in a way of I'm curious. I wonder what kind of staircase. And
Mhm.
then depending upon whether the client, I could say with a head, you can give me a head nod or a head shake if you're, see a staircase and if they say yes, then say, oh, that's interesting. And what kind is it? I might be even more indirect than that. One of the pieces, the thread that, where we were going with what kind of contributions NLP with Ericksonian hypnosis and SAG give, as we access, we get down the spiral staircase, right? And we find a moment of confidence and a time when you made a film or time when you, created some kind of, got your master's degree, whatever I'm making up about you, but,
Mhm, mhm.
and then it may be that we say, let's create what we call a self anchor, right? And a self anchor could be kinesthetic, it could be putting two fingertips together, not something that looks like you're meditating because we want something unique. It could be seeing a visual symbol. Most people know a word, if you say confidence, but that may not be unique anymore, right?
Mhm, mhm.
So the idea of anchoring, ANCHORING,
Yes.
right? Anchoring, that believe is another piece that is in the NLP technology that I haven't seen in other technologies,
Yeah,
other
I haven't seen
psychology.
it, but I see many use that
Mhm,
um,
mhm,
from NLP, and I think it does come, just the word anchor comes from NLP. I also use that quite a bit, and for me, my anchor is the breath. It's something that I've
mhm,
trained myself to have over the years.
mhm,
Just
mhm,
taking a deep breath and just anchoring myself, grounding. Just I am right here. I can even think
mhm,
and say
mhm,
here now.
mhm,
So
mhm.
just
Yeah,
very present.
yeah, I like that. And there's so much research about being present, being safe, no matter what your situation in life is, that is important. So I often will remind myself or clients what day is it, what year is it, and
Yeah,
then
yeah.
and
Yeah.
adding in, and this is a contribution that NLP and Ericksonian hypnosis has given me, but really my friend and teacher, Stephen Gilligan, who's known more in the Ericksonian hypnosis world, his style, and I've kind of adapted it, is, being in the present, adding in resources that help you feel, and it can vary, but here would be like safety, and again, who knows, maybe it's the forest or the ocean or whatever, we would find out. And then we start the work of what is it that you really want.
Yeah. There are a few processes that I like a lot in NLP, and what they do for me personally, and I think for the audience would be useful to learn, this capacity of being a multi-perspective person, being able to think like others, and also being able to step out of your thinking. And these processes are meta model, which is very useful. It's great to practice it. Also the modeling technique on I think it's 7 neurological levels.
Yeah, there's so many different concepts. When you think about NLP, and the early founders were asking how do these three people they looked at, Virginia Satir, Milton Erickson, and Fritz Perls. So it was all in the mental health world, really, but it's obviously gone out into the larger world of communication. But how do they get the results? So the question how, and then you're talking about modeling, right? And being able to be curious, right? And understanding your model and understanding others. And the meta model, really that contribution is coming from John Grinder's training with psycholinguistics. That was the influence initially, right? So neuro-linguistics, neuro-linguistic programming, and looking at, okay, so language represents our experience, but what do we really mean, right? So if somebody says, I want you to be more understanding, like, what do you really mean? What's your meaning? How would you know? Somebody says classic line, they don't understand me. So what do you mean by understanding? But who is they? We don't know, right? So sometimes it's doing like getting greater understanding. Sometimes it could be a little bit of challenging somebody's world. You always tell me that, I'm not good enough, always, like I always tell you that,
challenging, right? Challenging the word and the meaning behind the word.
It could be challenging your model, to open you up, to recognize, that maybe this is not always the way, or, to say, this is the only way to do it, and say, like, really, are there other ways? So the linguistic challenges, questions, of course, doing it, you mentioned early on with rapport, right? Having a way of so you're not putting somebody under the spotlight, interrogating them, And then the neurological levels, which is a contribution Robert Dilts had put together, recognizing, coming more from philosophical ideas about, looking at, well, where do we start? We're starting in our environment, and then from environment, we go into our behavior, and then from behavior, we go into our skill level, our capabilities, right? Into our values and beliefs and identity, into our greater, for business people, they might say their mission, or maybe more somebody in a little spiritual vein, maybe like my ultimate purpose, right?
Yeah, it's incredible. Who are you on all of these levels? What is your environment?
Yeah.
It's so useful for me because back then when we were practicing, I've had a few people to model, some actors. I think you suggested that I model Bergman, Ingmar Bergman.
Oh, wow.
That. And I also modeled Charlize Theron.
Wow.
Yeah, it was in a sense, it's a magical experience, I find, because it's kind of like, it makes me think about how some actors are able to impersonate, like comedians are really good at that.
Embody, yeah.
Embody, yeah, they embody, and they
Mhm,
embody them with the gestures and the tonality, and
mhm,
um, I'm sure some sort of neurological modeling is happening there. They do it
yeah,
so very quickly, where they just start thinking, believing, and acting like these
the
people.
character. Well, anytime actors come into our training, which has happened a lot, there's a lot of like relating to, like, oh, I've done this in my improv, I've done this in my theater training, accessing a memory, right? Seeing a character. And here, the modeling can go many different ways. It's like the ability to model an actor, or like, say, oh, I want to be like Michelle Obama, right? But I haven't met Michelle Obama.
Mhm.
So there's also, who do I know who I could actually interview,
Mm.
and really learning, so you and I have that kind of relationship, right? We could sit and you could say, Rachel, tell me about your ability to, train people, and what's the environment, and what kinds of behaviors are you doing, and what's your skill level, and what do you really believe, why do you believe that, and who do you feel you are at that moment, what's your ultimate purpose, right? You get all that, then you, as Elena, sit into that, and it's not going to be me because you're not a clone, it's going to be you, but you can kind of adapt that. Modeling is unconscious, right? I started off the youngest in my family. Of course, I'm looking at my siblings, I'm looking at my parents, right?
Mhm.
Earlier we talked about, like, even our country, like we may have modeled some cultural trance. Now, as an adult, as a choice, say, who do I want to be? What do I want to do? Oh, I have resources. Let me ask how. Right?
Interesting. Yeah, who do I want to model? And it goes to being out there, and
Mm-hmm.
also meeting people, and
Mm-hmm.
researching, and choosing your role models
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
wisely,
Yeah.
right?
I like the study of marketing, of like the focus groups a little bit. I think it's curious. Like, you ask a group of people, what gets you to buy this? What gets you, right? And in NLP, we're sort of doing like that, but just unique, one-on-one. What is it about you? And now let's see if I can teach that to somebody else,
Mhm.
with understanding how they think, how they behave, how they feel, and then translating it into your language. So, we're looking at, what would that do for you? We can't, we're not creating robots. This is not a technology of like non, feeling state. It's how to be flexible, how to be respectful, how to be creative, something you said before.
I like the respectful aspect, because we do tend to, the problem of conflict is holding on to your point of view and your
Mhm,
perspective, and that happens
mhm,
on the individual level, on social
mhm,
level.
mhm,
Countries do that, right? Holding
mhm,
on to our perspectives. And
mhm,
in NLP, like, modeling is one of these
mhm,
techniques that I find is helping us understand the other's
mhm.
point of view, helping me
Yeah.
understand who is Rachel as
Mhm,
a clinical psychologist,
mhm,
and NLP trainer, Ericksonian hypnotherapist, the co-director of NLP. What does she do in a day-to-day life?
mhm,
How does she handle conflict?
mhm.
What
Well,
gets you? Yeah, like.
it's a good question, and I think one of the things you were saying about NLP processes, that what you liked, and you were describing, is being able to, like, a meta model could be also like, we step out of and we look, right? And so we pay attention to and observe. And so, let's say here, you and I are speaking, right? This way. What if we were able to also, like, step out and equidistantly look at each other,
Mhm,
right, as
mhm.
an observer,
Yes.
right? And kind of go like, oh, that's interesting. Sometimes with conflict, it would be really helpful to just be able to say, how, we're not in conflict right now, but just like, so what's happening over here with Rachel? What's happening over there with Elena? Right? And that's one possibility. I could step into my own experience myself and kind of look out through my eyes and kind of get aware of what's going on for me. And of course, classically, step into somebody else's shoes, right?
Yes.
And we
Yeah.
work on that, and have all the possibilities. And maybe, I think Robert Dilts often talks about go into even a fourth dimension, like really view it from another place.
This is incredible. And this is the kind of things people can talk about and say, I want to try to step into your shoes. I want to see it from your point of view. And, but doing the actual practices over and over and over, like let's say at the NLP course, as you train, you actually do the practice of stepping out and describing.
That's right.
I see Elena, looking down, and what is she feeling? She may be feeling this way, or she's thinking that. So I stepped out, and now I'm actually describing. You never do this in real life.
Yes.
But
I think you're right. The practices are the techniques. You get to do that in training. I get to do that with clients, that once I know the techniques, from the trainer point of view, I kind of say, okay, I don't have to teach my client the technique. In a class, we're actually teaching, we'll do it, as you probably remember, we do a demonstration, and, we get to have partners. And, we started this interview with the idea like, oh, we're online. So we still do demonstrations online, and we then break out into those breakout groups. Then we come back, and of course, if somebody needs help, they press the help button. And then we come in, and, of course, we're available if they need something after class too. Interestingly, also, just think about this, Elena, we're recording it. Like we're recording now. We didn't used to record, maybe we had, what did we have in the old days? VHS or whatever, right? And so there maybe somebody could find like an old YouTube of me, maybe, right? But, now a student who's in our class gets to have that recording. I'm not sure if it lasts forever, but they have it for a certain period of time.
Yeah, you can rewatch it and study it again, which we didn't have that option.
Yeah. I can only remember. I can remember you coming in and actually doing some other interview with me where you came in with a camera crew. I don't know what it was.
Yes. I did an interview with you and Steve as well. This was for my film about hypnosis. That was some time ago. I stopped the film. I didn't finish it. I will come back to it. But, Rachel, sometimes when you do certain things, it feels a little tight, like it's just something not flowing. So I stopped, and I feel like there will be a time I will come back to it in a completely different way and make it easier.
I believe in you, and I know you'll do that. You mentioned Steve, so I do want to say Stephen leads, my partner in life, my partner in the NLP Center of New York. So, what we've created together is really, also sort of a comment about NLP and working together as a couple, and, being parents, and now growing into this age, it's because this has been since 1982 that we've known each other.
This is what drew me to your course. I saw a picture of both of you. I think it was in one of those magazines in New York, like Spirit. I can't remember. It was a large magazine.
Yeah.
And I was looking for the NLP course, and I saw both of you, and I'm like, I'm drawn to it. They look like a couple. This is something that I'd like to have in the future. So I felt trusting.
Yeah. That's so nice. I'm so glad. Yeah, I think, people come for all different reasons. And, sometimes it's just because they've heard about NLP from a friend.
You get a lot of referrals, I'm sure, because you guys are doing an incredible work. And I keep sending people to you. To come back very quickly, of course, what you're teaching is on so many levels, that idea of constantly expanding your model of the world, pushing the limits of your mind, and seeing things from your perspective, allowing yourself to see things from other people's perspective, improving your communication, and really finding ways to resolve misunderstanding and conflict. At least this is what I'm getting. This is the
Yeah, I think you
huge
did a
thing for me.
good job of restating, and we call it backtracking, you know,
Yeah.
in the NLP jargon. Yeah, you
Yeah.
did a great job of saying that.
Rachel, what are the lessons that you have learned from being a co-director of the NLP Center? What's one or two big lessons?
Let's see. This is a big, probably one thing is learning how to listen to a dream without jumping immediately to saying, how are we going to do that?
Dream, you mean what type of dream? Like,
Well, dream could be, hey, maybe we should do some online training, right? And maybe in my past was like, how are we going to do that? Versus, okay, tell me more. Let me understand, what do you specifically mean by online, right? Doing some good meta model questions. My learning from my own pattern of learning how to listen to the dream, to acknowledge, to hear it without having to immediately go into what we call the realist, you know, of how are we going to do that, right? So I think that's been a big growth for me as you know, because really I started in my 20s and now I'm in my mid 60s. So there's been a lot of different centuries, you know, of learning here, decades anyway, not centuries.
Related. Interesting, because when in my 20s, even 30s, I wanted things to happen quickly. Like you said, there's a dream, there's a goal. How do we do it? What are the steps? Right. And what you're saying is take the time.
Take the time, but I think just for me, my big change is allowing the dream to just sit for a little bit without having to ask how. Just that.
What does it do when it sits there a little bit? What does it do?
Well, just to live into it. You know, we talk about this idea of as if, you know, live into it and see, you know, not exactly the secret idea, because I believe in manifesting by action, but I do understand that it's good to allow the person really to look up and
just embodying it, right?
Yeah, believe it, embodying it, and knowing something is possible. That eventually you do have to go into realist, but I've just learned how to take a pause from that, because that was my quick style. And I think the other thing that I've learned, because as I said, you know, there've been many decades, is now having adult children in their 30s, that I've really learned to be more of aware of listening without having to fix something. You know, that I've learned. That's like my personal, you know, piece. I don't know if that's what you were looking for, but on a personal
that's very
level.
Interesting. Just being present, just providing your presence, right?
Well, understanding that everybody has a different model, and you know, I have a high value for family and working on increasing closeness and communication, and that maybe that people have different ways. You know, I may be always somebody who wants to talk about it, and that's maybe why you and I enjoy, like, oh, let's have a, you know, some people aren't as animated, and I've learned to be more quiet and connected on that way.
And it is the Ericksonian style, in a sense that you also give them space to come to their own understanding or resources. And also the other element that you're probably seeing, at least I'm seeing it here, is that your presence is important, and your attention can be magical, especially coming from a wise woman such as you.
Oh, thanks.
Just, being there for someone and trusting them, that element is really.
Yeah, I like that idea of being there, holding the space, you know, maintaining curiosity, you know, going back to our idea of being present, being centered. Yeah, I do have a client coming up, so I have to.
Yeah, we're gonna get going.
Adios.
I wouldn't hold you more than we're supposed to. We have 5 minutes left.
Okay.
And the last part before we finish, what are your hopes for the future? What's next for NLP Center?
The NLP Center of New York. Wow. continuing to contribute to, a population that deserves to feel that, each person is respected and valued, right? So just providing online, and the in-person will come as our city is safe for that with COVID. This is obviously a COVID interview a little bit, right?
Yeah.
But yeah, I think it's really to continue with the training, and like I said, we do individual counseling, so just that way, that's where we're going. It's steady. Sometimes I think of us as just a sort of a small company, because Stephen and I are the main people. We have a staff, a couple of trainers that work with us, and we're very steady and very personable. We're not looking for thousands of people to attend. Like we have, I don't know if you remember how many people are in your classes, but it could range.
20 to 30, I think. Maybe was it 20, 25?
Yeah, now it could range, it could be 20, but it could also be 6, so it's kind of nice that there's an intimacy that we create. So kind of look forward to that as we grow, continue to maintain relationships of meaningfulness, and helping people stay present.
Thank you. Thank you for doing the work that you and Steve are both doing, helping so many people. And I'm immensely grateful for being your student and still staying in touch with you. So thank you so much for your time.
I think I applaud you. Yay for you, all the work you do. You're a real innovator and entrepreneur, and I'm so happy to be in your forest or ocean, whichever you pick.
Both.
Down the spiral staircase or the very whatever. We got it all.
Thank you, Rachel. My regards to Steve, and we'll be talking soon. I'll send you a copy of this podcast. Thank you so much. Have a wonderful day. Bye-bye.
Okay, thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.